Hey there, and welcome to tonight's journey. Before we dive into this story, I want you to get comfortable, maybe adjust your pillow, pull up that blanket, and let your breathing slow down just a bit. Tonight, we're going to walk through an entire life, from the very beginning to where we stand now. A life that's been documented, dissected, celebrated, and criticized more than perhaps any other in modern American history. So before you settle in, take a moment to like this video if you're enjoying the content, and subscribe if you want more of these deep dive stories. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. There's something beautiful about knowing we're all here together from different corners of the world, sharing this quiet moment. Now, dim those lights if you haven't already. Maybe turn on a fan for that gentle background hum, and let's ease into tonight's story together. We begin on a summer morning in 1946 in the borough of Queens, New York. The war had ended, America was rebuilding, and in a hospital room at Jamaica Hospital, a baby was born who would one day become one of the most recognizable names on the planet. But that morning, he was simply Donald John Trump, the fourth child of Frederick Christ Trump Sr. and Mary Ann McLeod Trump, arriving into a world that was already shaped by ambition, real estate, and the immigrant dream of something better. The house where young Donald would grow up wasn't modest by any stretch. It was a mansion in the Jamaica Estates neighborhood of Queens, a sprawling Tudor-style home with 23 rooms sitting on nearly an acre of manicured lawn. This wasn't the kind of neighborhood where children played stickball in the streets. This was where successful families built their American dreams in brick and mortar, where the sounds of lawnmowers and sprinkler systems replaced the urban symphony of the city proper. Fred Trump, Donald's father, was already well established in the real estate business by the time his fourth child arrived. He'd built his empire constructing and operating middle-income apartments throughout Queens, Staten Island, and Brooklyn. Fred understood something fundamental about New York that would later influence his son's entire worldview: that real estate wasn't just about buildings, it was about power, prestige, and positioning yourself in the right place at the right time. Mary Ann, Donald's mother, had come to America from Scotland in the 1930s, carrying with her the immigrants' hunger for success and stability. She was a homemaker in the traditional sense, but she understood the social dynamics of their neighborhood, the importance of appearances, and how to navigate the complex world of New York society. Together, Fred and Mary Ann created an environment where success wasn't just expected, it was inevitable. The Trump children, Mary Ann, Fred Jr., Elizabeth, Donald, and later Robert, grew up in a household where dinner table conversations often revolved around business deals, construction projects, and the art of negotiation. Fred would quiz his children on current events, challenge their thinking, and instill in them a competitive spirit that would define their adult lives. But even among these ambitious siblings, Donald showed something different from an early age. While his older brother, Fred Jr., was quieter, more introspective, and would later struggle with the family's expectations, Donald displayed an almost magnetic confidence. He was the child who would argue with adults, who would challenge authority figures, and who seemed to understand instinctively that attention, whether positive or negative, was a form of currency. His parents noticed this early, and it both impressed and concerned them. By the time Donald was 8 years old, something remarkable had already happened. His father had structured the family's finances in such a way that each of the Trump children was receiving approximately $20,000 per year, which in today's money would be equivalent to about $265,000 annually. This meant that Donald Trump was quite literally a millionaire before he reached double digits. It was an unusual childhood by any measure, where money wasn't something you worried about, but rather something you learned to manage, multiply, and leverage. The neighborhood itself was a carefully curated environment. Jamaica Estates was home to successful businessmen, doctors, lawyers, and other members of New York's professional class. The houses were large, the lawns were perfect, and the children attended the best private schools. It was a world where success was measured not just in dollars, but in square footage, in the quality of your landscaping, and in your family's reputation within the community. Donald's early education began at the Kew Forest School, a private institution that catered to the children of successful families. Even there, among his privileged peers, Donald stood out. Teachers would later remember him as bright but challenging, a student who questioned authority and seemed to possess an unusual confidence for his age. He wasn't necessarily the best student academically, but he had something else, a presence that made people notice him. The young Donald was fascinated by his father's business from an early age, while other children might have been interested in sports or hobbies. Donald would accompany Fred to construction sites, watching as buildings rose from empty lots, observing how his father interacted with contractors, city officials, and tenants. These weren't casual visits, they were informal apprenticeships where Donald learned that real estate was about more than just buying and selling property. It was about understanding people, reading situations, and knowing when to push and when to pull back. But this fascination with his father's world came with its own set of challenges. Donald was becoming increasingly difficult to manage at school. His confidence was edging toward defiance, and his teachers were finding it harder to channel his energy in productive directions. He wasn't a bad child, but he was certainly a strong willed one, and by the time he reached seventh grade, his parents had made a decision that would fundamentally shape the rest of his life. The decision came during a family dinner in 1959. Donald had gotten into another incident at school, nothing serious by today's standards, but enough to convince Fred and Mary Ann that their son needed a different kind of environment. Fred had heard about the New York Military Academy, a private boarding school located about 60 miles north of the city in Cornwall-on-Hudson. It was the kind of institution that promised to channel young men's energy and ambition into discipline, leadership, and academic achievement. The conversation wasn't presented as a punishment, but rather as an opportunity. Fred explained to his 13-year-old son that the military academy would teach him discipline, responsibility, and leadership skills that would serve him well in business and in life. It was a boarding school, which meant Donald would be leaving home for the first time, but it was also an opportunity to prove himself in a new environment. Cyrus. The New York Military Academy sat on a hill overlooking the Hudson River, its Gothic Revival buildings creating an imposing silhouette against the sky. When Donald first arrived in the fall of 1959, he found himself in a world completely different from the comfortable suburbs of Queens. Here, days began with reveille at 6 in the morning. Meals were eaten in silence unless permission was granted to speak, and every aspect of daily life was governed by military protocol. The academy wasn't just about education, it was about transformation. Young men arrived as teenagers and left as disciplined adults, ready for college, military service, or the business world. The curriculum was rigorous, combining traditional academics with military training, leadership development, and character building. Students wore uniforms, marched in formation, and learned to take orders as well as give them. For Donald, this environment was initially challenging but ultimately transformative. The structure and discipline that had been missing from his earlier education was now imposed from the outside, and he found himself thriving in ways that surprised even him. The military hierarchy appealed to his competitive nature, and he quickly realized that success here was measured not just in grades, but in leadership ability, athletic performance, and respect from both peers and superiors. The Academy's emphasis on leadership particularly resonated with young Donald. Students were expected to take on increasing responsibilities as they advanced through the ranks, and Donald discovered that he had a natural ability to motivate and organize his fellow cadets. He wasn't just following rules, he was learning how to make others want to follow rules, how to inspire loyalty, and how to project authority, even when he might not have felt it internally. Athletics became another avenue for Donald to distinguish himself. He was naturally competitive and found that sports provided an outlet for his energy, while also teaching him valuable lessons about teamwork, strategy, and the importance of preparation. Whether on the baseball field or the basketball court, he learned that success required not just talent, but dedication, practice, and the ability to perform under pressure. The social dynamics at the academy were complex and nuanced. Students came from various backgrounds, some from wealthy families like Donald's, others from more modest circumstances who had earned scholarships or whose parents had sacrificed to afford the tuition. This diversity taught Donald how to read people quickly, how to adapt his communication style to different audiences, and how to build alliances across social and economic lines. By his senior year, Donald had risen to the rank of captain and had become one of the Academy's star athletes and student leaders. His transformation from the challenging student at Kew Forest to a disciplined, successful cadet was remarkable. He had learned to channel his natural confidence and competitive drive into socially acceptable and productive outlets. The boy who had once questioned authority had learned how to work within systems while still maintaining his individual identity. The lessons he learned at the New York Military Academy would stay with him for the rest of his life. The importance of hierarchy, the value of discipline, the power of appearance and presentation, and the understanding that leadership was as much about psychology as it was about position. These weren't just academic concepts, they were lived experiences that shaped his worldview and approach to business, relationships, and eventually politics. As graduation approached in 1964, Donald faced a decision that many young men of his generation were confronting. The Vietnam War was escalating, and military service was a real possibility for college-bound students. But Donald's path had already been largely determined by his family's expectations and his own ambitions. He would be going to college, first to continue his education and eventually to join his father's business empire. The young man who left the New York Military Academy that spring was fundamentally different from the 13-year-old who had arrived 5 years earlier. He was taller, more confident, and possessed a sense of purpose that would guide him through the next phase of his life. The discipline and structure of military school had given him tools for success, but it had also reinforced his belief that he was destined for something significant. As we follow this story forward, we'll see how these early experiences, this unique blend of privilege and discipline, confidence and structure, would shape every decision Donald Trump would make in the decades to come. From his first real estate deals to his eventual rise to the presidency, the foundation was being laid in those formative years in Queens and at the military academy overlooking the Hudson River. But for now, let's pause here in 1964 with an 18-year-old Donald Trump standing on the threshold of adulthood, ready to take on the world with all the confidence and ambition that his upbringing had instilled in him. The boy was becoming a man, and the man was about to become a force that would reshape American business, entertainment, and politics in ways that no one could have imagined. The autumn of 1964 brought with it the crisp air of change, and for Donald Trump, it marked the beginning of his college years at Fordham University in the Bronx. The campus, with its Gothic Revival architecture and tree lined walkways, provided a stark contrast to the regimented environment of military school. Here, among the Jesuit educated students and faculty, Donald found himself in a world that valued intellectual discourse, philosophical inquiry, and academic excellence. But even as he settled into dormitory life and attended his first lectures, something was stirring within him. The business world that his father inhabited seemed to call to him with an almost magnetic pull. While his classmates debated literature and philosophy, Donald found himself drawn to conversations about real estate markets, construction techniques, and the intricate dance of New York City politics that seemed to govern every major development project. The 2 years at Fordham were formative in their own way, but they also served to crystallize Donald's understanding of what he truly wanted to pursue. The liberal arts education was valuable, certainly, but it felt like preparation for someone else's life. Donald knew that his destiny lay not in the abstract realm of academic theory, but in the concrete world of business, negotiation, and deal making that his father had introduced him to all those years ago. It was during his sophomore year that Donald made a decision that would redirect the entire trajectory of his education and career. He had heard about the Wharton School of Finance and Commerce at the University of Pennsylvania, an institution renowned for producing some of the most successful businessmen in America. The school's reputation for combining rigorous academic training with practical business application seemed perfectly aligned with his ambitions. The transfer process itself was competitive and demanding, but Donald approached it with the same confidence and determination that had served him well at military school. His grades at Fordham were solid. His letters of recommendation spoke to his leadership potential, and his family's connections certainly didn't hurt his application. When the acceptance letter arrived in the spring of 1966, it felt like validation of everything he had been working toward. Philadelphia in the late 1960s was a city in transition, much like the rest of America. The civil rights movement was reshaping social consciousness, the Vietnam War was dividing the nation, and a new generation of young Americans was questioning traditional authority structures. Against this backdrop of social upheaval, Donald found himself immersed in the more focused world of business education at one of the country's premier institutions. The Wharton School was demanding in ways that Fordham had not been. Here, students were expected not just to memorize theories and formulas, but to understand the complex interplay of economics, finance, and human psychology that drove successful business ventures. Professors challenge students to think critically about market forces, to analyze case studies of both spectacular successes and devastating failures, and to develop the analytical skills necessary to navigate an increasingly complex business environment. Donald threw himself into his studies with characteristic intensity. He was particularly drawn to courses in real estate finance, urban development, and business strategy. These weren't abstract concepts to him, they were tools that he could immediately apply to the world he planned to enter upon graduation. While other students might have seen their education as preparation for some distant future career, Donald was already mentally applying classroom lessons to the projects and opportunities he observed in his father's business. But perhaps more importantly than the formal curriculum, Wharton provided Donald with exposure to a network of ambitious, intelligent peers who shared his drive for success. His classmates came from various backgrounds, some from established business families like his own, others from more modest circumstances, who had earned their way into this prestigious institution through sheer academic merit. This diversity of perspectives and experiences broadened Donald's understanding of different approaches to business and success. Even as he pursued his studies with dedication, Donald couldn't resist the pull of real world business opportunities. During his time at Wharton, he began making small investments in Philadelphia real estate, using the analytical skills he was learning in class to identify undervalued properties with potential for appreciation. These weren't major deals by his father's standards, but they represented his first independent steps into the world of real estate investment. The experience of analyzing market conditions, negotiating purchase agreements, and managing renovation projects while still a college student gave Donald practical experience that complemented his academic learning. He discovered that he had an intuitive understanding of market psychology, an ability to see potential where others saw only problems, and a talent for convincing others to share his vision for a property's future. Meanwhile, the larger world continued to intrude upon campus life in ways that couldn't be ignored. The Vietnam War was escalating, and young men across the country were facing the reality of military service. The draft lottery system had been implemented, and college students were acutely aware that their educational deferments might not protect them indefinitely from the conflict in Southeast Asia. For Donald, the specter of military service created a complex set of considerations. His experience at military academy had given him an appreciation for structure and discipline, but it had also shown him that his talents and interests lay in the business world rather than in military service. Like many young men of his generation, he found himself navigating the moral and practical complexities of a war that seemed increasingly controversial and unpopular among his peers. The resolution came through a combination of educational deferments and a medical diagnosis that would exempt him from military service. A physician's examination revealed bone spurs in his feet, a condition that, while not debilitating in daily life, was sufficient to disqualify him from military service. This medical deferment, combined with his college attendance, meant that Donald could focus entirely on his education and future business career without the uncertainty of potential military deployment. As his college years progressed, Donald found himself increasingly eager to transition from student to professional. The theoretical knowledge he was gaining at Wharton was valuable, but he was hungry for the practical experience that only came from actual business dealings. He began spending more time in New York, accompanying his father to meetings, observing negotiations, and gradually taking on more responsibility within the family business operations. Fred Trump had been watching his son's development with considerable interest and pride. Donald's combination of academic achievement, practical experience, and natural confidence suggested that he might be ready to take on significant responsibilities within the Trump organization even before his graduation. The real estate market in New York was evolving rapidly, with new opportunities emerging in Manhattan that required fresh thinking and bold vision. The relationship between father and son during this period was complex and multifaceted. Fred was clearly grooming Donald to eventually take over the family business, but he was also careful to ensure that his son earned his position through demonstrated competence rather than simple inheritance. Donald, for his part, was eager to prove himself, but also determined to expand the business beyond the outer borough focus that had defined his father's career. By his senior year at Wharton, Donald had developed a clear vision for his post-graduation plans. He would return to New York and join his father's company full-time, but with the understanding that he would be given significant autonomy to pursue new opportunities and expand the business into new markets. The education he had received, both formal and informal, had prepared him for this transition, and he approached it with the confidence of someone who believed he was destined for great success. The graduation ceremony in May 1968 marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. As Donald walked across the stage to receive his Bachelor of Science degree in economics, he wasn't just completing his education, he was formally launching what would become one of the most documented and controversial business careers in American history. The knowledge, connections, and confidence he had gained during his college years would serve as the foundation for everything that followed. But perhaps most importantly, his time at Wharton had confirmed his belief that success in business required more than just intelligence or family connections. It demanded vision, persistence, and the ability to see opportunities where others saw only obstacles. These lessons, learned in Philadelphia classrooms and reinforced through real-world experience, would guide his approach to every challenge and opportunity he would face in the decades ahead. As we continue this journey through Donald Trump's life, we see how these formative educational experiences created the intellectual and emotional framework that would drive his ambitions. The boy who had been sent to military school to learn discipline had become a young man with the education, connections, and confidence necessary to build an empire. The foundation was complete, and now it was time to begin construction on the life and career that would make Donald Trump a household name around the world. The summer of 1968 felt different in New York City. The air itself seemed charged with possibility and tension, as if the entire metropolis was holding its breath, waiting for something significant to happen. For a recent Wharton graduate named Donald Trump, that something was about to begin in earnest. He returned to the family business, not as the eager teenager who had once tagged along to construction sites, but as an educated, ambitious young man ready to make his mark on the world. The Trump management offices were located in a modest building in Brooklyn, far from the gleaming towers of Manhattan that dominated the city's skyline. But for Fred Trump, this outer borough location made perfect sense. His business was built on understanding the needs and desires of middle class families, people who wanted decent housing at reasonable prices without the astronomical costs of Manhattan real estate. It was a proven formula that had generated substantial wealth for the family, but to Donald's eyes, it also represented limitations. Walking into those offices for the first time as a full-time employee, Donald found himself in a world that was both familiar and foreign. He knew the people, understood the basic operations, and had absorbed years of informal education about the real estate business. But now he was seeing it all from a different perspective, as someone who would be responsible for results, accountable for decisions, and expected to contribute meaningfully to the company's growth and profitability. Fred had structured his son's entry into the business carefully, rather than simply handing him a title and expecting him to figure things out. He created a systematic introduction to every aspect of the operation. Donald spent time with the property managers, learning how to deal with tenant complaints, maintenance issues, and the countless small problems that arose in managing thousands of apartment units across the outer boroughs. He worked with the construction supervisors, gaining first-hand experience in project management, cost control, and quality assurance. These weren't glamorous assignments, but they were essential education for someone who would eventually be responsible for the entire operation. Donald approached these tasks with characteristic intensity, asking questions, challenging assumptions, and gradually developing his own ideas about how things could be done more efficiently or effectively. But even as he immersed himself in the day-to-day operations of the family business, Donald's eyes were constantly drawn toward Manhattan. The island's skyline represented something different from the practical, middle-income housing that had built the Trump fortune. Manhattan was about prestige, power, and the kind of high-profile projects that could transform a developer from a successful businessman into a genuine celebrity. The timing of Donald's entry into the business world couldn't have been more complex. The year 1968 had been marked by social upheaval, political turmoil, and a growing awareness of civil rights issues that would soon directly impact the Trump organization. The assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. in April had intensified national conversations about racial equality and discrimination, issues that would soon arrive at the company's doorstep in the most direct and challenging way possible. It was during this period of adjustment and learning that the Trump organization faced its first major crisis under Donald's watch. In 1973, just 5 years after he had joined the company full-time, the U.S. Justice Department filed a lawsuit against Trump management, alleging that the company had systematically discriminated against African American renters seeking apartments in their buildings throughout Queens and Brooklyn. The allegations were serious and specific. According to the Justice Department's complaint, the company had employed various tactics to discourage or prevent black applicants from renting apartments, including telling them that no units were available when they actually were, requiring different rental terms and conditions, and steering them away from certain buildings or developments. These weren't vague accusations of bias, but detailed claims of systematic discrimination that violated federal fair housing laws. For Donald, this crisis represented his first major test as a businessman and a public figure. The company had built its reputation on providing quality housing to working families, and these allegations struck at the heart of that image. The potential consequences were severe, including substantial financial penalties, court ordered changes to company policies, and significant damage to the Trump name and reputation. The family's response to the lawsuit revealed important aspects of Donald's emerging approach to crisis management and public relations. Rather than quietly settling the matter or admitting wrongdoing, the Trumps decided to fight the charges aggressively. They hired Roy Cohn, a controversial but highly effective attorney who had previously gained notoriety as chief counsel to Senator Joseph McCarthy during the communist witch hunts of the 1950s. Cohn's approach to defending the Trump organization was characteristically combative. He filed a countersuit against the Justice Department, claiming that the government's investigation had damaged the company's reputation and demanding substantial monetary damages. This aggressive response sent a clear message that the Trumps would not be intimidated by federal authorities and were prepared to use every legal tool at their disposal to protect their interests. The legal battle stretched on for months, generating significant media attention and forcing Donald to navigate his first major public relations crisis. He discovered that managing public perception was just as important as managing the legal aspects of the case, and he began developing the media skills that would serve him throughout his career. He learned how to craft statements that defended the company without admitting liability, how to present the family as victims of government overreach, and how to maintain confidence and composure under intense scrutiny. Eventually, the case was resolved through a settlement agreement that represented a compromise for both sides. The Trump organization did not admit to any wrongdoing, but it did agree to implement new policies and procedures designed to ensure compliance with federal fair housing laws. The company also agreed to take specific steps to affirmatively market apartments to minority renters and to submit regular reports to the government documenting these efforts. For Donald, the resolution of the discrimination lawsuit was both a relief and a learning experience. He had survived his first major crisis as a businessman, but he had also gained valuable insights into the complex intersection of business, law, media, and public opinion. These lessons would prove invaluable as he embarked on increasingly ambitious and high-profile projects in the years ahead. The experience also reinforced his belief in the importance of aggressive self-defense and the power of narrative control. Throughout the lawsuit, he had watched how different media outlets covered the story, how public opinion could be shaped through strategic communications, and how legal and public relations strategies needed to work in coordination to achieve the best possible outcome. But perhaps most importantly, the discrimination lawsuit marked the beginning of Donald's understanding that success in business, particularly at the highest levels, required more than just financial acumen and deal making skills. It demanded the ability to navigate complex political and social environments, to manage public perception, and to maintain credibility and authority, even when facing serious challenges to his reputation. As the legal proceedings concluded and the company implemented its new policies, Donald found himself more determined than ever to expand beyond the outer borough projects that had defined the family business. The discrimination lawsuit had been resolved, but it had also highlighted the limitations of operating primarily in the middle income housing market. The scrutiny, the regulatory oversight, and the relatively modest profit margins all pointed toward the advantages of moving into different types of real estate development. Manhattan beckoned with its promise of higher profile projects, more substantial profits, and the kind of prestige that could elevate the Trump name from successful family business to major player in New York's competitive real estate market. Donald began studying Manhattan development patterns, identifying potential opportunities, and laying the groundwork for what would become his first major independent project. The transformation from outer borough apartment buildings to Manhattan luxury developments wouldn't happen overnight, but the foundation was being laid during these early years in the family business. Donald was learning not just how to manage properties and construction projects, but how to handle crisis situations, navigate regulatory environments, and build the kind of public profile that could support much larger ambitions. As we continue following this remarkable journey, we can see how these early experiences in the family business were shaping the approach and philosophy that would define Donald Trump's entire career. The lessons learned during the discrimination lawsuit, the skills developed in managing day to day operations, and the growing confidence in his own abilities were all preparing him for the much larger stage that awaited in Manhattan. The young man who had returned from Wharton with big dreams was beginning to understand that achieving those dreams would require not just vision and ambition, but also the ability to survive and thrive in the face of serious challenges. The discrimination lawsuit had been his first real test, and he had passed it. Now it was a time to see what he could accomplish when he set his sights on bigger targets and bolder goals. The foundation was solid, the lessons had been learned, and the stage was set for Donald Trump to begin his transformation from successful family business manager to major Manhattan developer. The outer boroughs had taught him how to build and manage properties, but Manhattan would teach him how to build and manage an empire. The year 1976 marked a turning point that would define not just Donald Trump's career, but his entire approach to business for decades to come. It was the year he would make his first truly independent move, stepping out from under his father's protective wing and into the unforgiving world of Manhattan real estate development. The project that would launch this transformation was ambitious, risky, and perfectly suited to his emerging personality. The renovation of the dilapidated Commodore Hotel into what would become the Grand Hyatt. The Commodore Hotel sat like a tired giant next to Grand Central Terminal, its once grand facade now grimy and unwelcoming. a relic of an earlier era when railway travel had made it a prestigious destination. By the mid 1970s, the hotel had become a symbol of Manhattan's urban decay, its lobby filled more with vagrants than guests, its rooms largely empty, and its financial situation so dire that bankruptcy seemed inevitable. Most developers saw only problems when they looked at the Commodore, but Donald saw opportunity. The challenge wasn't just the building itself, but the complex web of financial, political, and legal obstacles that surrounded any major development project in New York City. The hotel was owned by the Penn Central Railroad, which was itself in bankruptcy proceedings. The city was facing its own fiscal crisis, with municipal services stretched thin and tax revenues declining. Union labor costs were astronomical. Construction permits required navigating Byzantine bureaucratic processes, and financing for risky projects was nearly impossible to obtain. But Donald had observed something during his years working in the family business that most people missed. Success in New York real estate wasn't just about having good ideas or access to capital. It was about understanding the intricate relationships between business, politics, and media that actually controlled how things got done in the city. He had watched his father navigate these waters with skill and patience, but Donald believed he could do more than just navigate them. He could master them. The first step was forming a partnership with the Hyatt Corporation, a hotel chain that had the operational expertise and financial resources that Donald lacked. But this wasn't simply a matter of approaching Hyatt with a proposal. Donald needed to convince them that he could deliver something they couldn't achieve on their own, the political connections and local knowledge necessary to make the project work in New York's challenging environment. The negotiations with Hyatt revealed Donald's emerging talent for what would become his signature skill, the ability to project confidence and competence even when operating from a position of relative weakness. He didn't have the track record of major Manhattan developments that Hyatt might have expected from a partner, but he had something else. He had the Trump name, which carried weight in New York political circles, and he had an infectious enthusiasm for the project that made others want to believe in his vision. The real breakthrough came when Donald managed to secure something that experienced developers with decades more experience had been unable to obtain: a massive tax abatement from New York City. The negotiations for this abatement revealed the full extent of Donald's understanding of how power really worked in the city. He didn't just submit applications and hope for the best. He cultivated relationships with key political figures, understanding their motivations and concerns, and crafted his proposals in ways that made supporting his project politically advantageous for them. The tax abatement he eventually secured was extraordinary by any measure. The city agreed to freeze the property taxes on the renovated hotel at the current level for 40 years, a concession originally worth about $4 million annually, but which would ultimately total approximately $400 million over the life of the agreement when adjusted for inflation. It was the kind of deal that established developers spent years trying to achieve, and Donald had secured it for his first major Manhattan project. The political maneuvering required to obtain this abatement provided Donald with invaluable education in the intersection of business and government. He learned how to identify the key decision makers in complex bureaucratic structures, how to frame his proposals in terms of broader public benefits, and how to build coalitions of support that could withstand political pressure and opposition. These skills would prove essential in every major project he would undertake in the years ahead. But securing the tax abatement was only the beginning of the challenges involved in transforming the Commodore Hotel. The actual renovation process required coordinating dozens of contractors, managing union labor relations, navigating environmental and safety regulations, and maintaining construction schedules while the hotel remained partially operational. Donald threw himself into these challenges with characteristic intensity, spending long hours on the construction site, learning the details of every trade involved in the project. The construction phase also provided Donald with his first real experience in managing large scale media attention. The transformation of the Commodore was a visible symbol of Manhattan's potential for renewal during a period when many people had written off the city as ungovernable and economically doomed. Journalists, photographers, and television crews regularly visited the construction site, and Donald quickly learned how to use this attention to build support for the project and enhance his own reputation as an innovative developer. He discovered that he had a natural talent for working with media representatives, understanding what kinds of stories they were looking for and how to provide them with compelling narratives that served his interests while meeting their professional needs. The renovation wasn't just a construction project in Donald's hands. It became a story about vision, determination, and the possibility of urban renewal that captured public imagination in ways that purely financial or technical achievements could not. The Grand Hyatt officially opened in September 1980, and the transformation was indeed remarkable. The grimy, deteriorating facade had been replaced with gleaming glass and steel that reflected the energy and optimism of the surrounding cityscape. The interior featured modern amenities, elegant furnishings, and the kind of sophisticated atmosphere that attracted business travelers, tourists, and New Yorkers looking for upscale dining and entertainment options. More importantly for Donald's future, the success of the Grand Hyatt renovation established him as a serious player in Manhattan real estate development. The project had been completed on schedule and within budget. The hotel was profitable from its opening day, and the tax abatement had provided the kind of financial advantages that made future projects much more feasible. Donald had proven that he could handle complex negotiations, manage large scale construction projects, and deliver results that satisfied both his business partners and the city officials who had supported the project. The success also validated Donald's belief that Manhattan offered opportunities that simply didn't exist in the outer borough projects that had built the family fortune. The Grand Hyatt renovation had generated far more media attention, political recognition, and professional credibility than any number of apartment buildings in Queens or Brooklyn could have provided. The prestige associated with major Manhattan developments opened doors to financing, partnerships, and future opportunities that would have been impossible to access through smaller scale projects. But perhaps most importantly, the Grand Hyatt project had taught Donald valuable lessons about the power of narrative and perception in real estate development. The actual renovation work had been competently managed, but it was the story surrounding the project that had captured public imagination and generated the kind of support that made future projects possible. Donald began to understand that successful development required not just technical expertise and financial acumen, but also the ability to create compelling narratives that made people want to be part of whatever he was building. As the Grand Hyatt began establishing itself as a successful addition to Manhattan's hospitality landscape, Donald was already planning his next move. The lessons learned from the Commodore renovation, the relationships built during the political negotiations, and the confidence gained from achieving something that many people had thought impossible, all pointed toward even more ambitious projects. The outer boroughs had taught him how to manage properties, but Manhattan was teaching him how to create legends. The stage was set for what would become Donald Trump's most iconic achievement, Trump's Tower. But that project would require everything he had learned from the Grand Hyatt renovation and more. It would test his ability to handle even more complex negotiations, manage even larger construction challenges, and create the kind of architectural statement that could establish the Trump name as synonymous with luxury, success, and innovation in one of the world's most competitive real estate markets. The young man who had returned from Wharton with ambitious dreams was becoming the developer who could turn those dreams into reality. The Grand Hyatt had been his proof of concept, demonstrating that he could succeed in Manhattan's unforgiving environment. Now it was time to see how far that success could take him and how big those dreams could become when supported by proven ability and growing confidence. The foundation had been laid, the first major victory had been achieved, and Donald Trump was ready to begin building the empire that would make his name known around the world. The boy from Queens was becoming the man from Manhattan, and the transformation was just beginning. The success of the Grand Hyatt had given Donald something invaluable in the world of Manhattan real estate: credibility. But credibility, he understood, was only as good as your next project. As 1979 dawned, Donald found himself in possession of something even more precious than reputation. He had secured the rights to develop what would become the most recognizable address associated with his name, 725 Fifth Avenue, the future site of Trump Tower. The location was everything in real estate, and this particular corner of Fifth Avenue represented the absolute pinnacle of Manhattan luxury. Directly adjacent to Tiffany and Company, across from the Plaza Hotel, and in the heart of what was already being recognized as one of the world's premier shopping districts, the site offered possibilities that went far beyond simple real estate development. This wasn't just about building another luxury residential tower. This was about creating a statement, a landmark, a physical manifestation of everything Donald Trump was becoming in the public imagination. The negotiations to secure the site had been complex and delicate, requiring the kind of diplomatic finesse that Donald was still developing. The property was controlled by Equitable Life Assurance Company, a conservative institution that was naturally cautious about partnering with a relatively young developer whose track record consisted of a single major Manhattan project. But Donald had learned from the Grand Hyatt experience that confidence, properly presented, could compensate for limited experience. The key to winning over Equitable was demonstrating that this project would be different from anything that had been built before. Donald wasn't proposing just another luxury apartment building or office tower. He was envisioning a mixed-use development that would combine residential units, retail space, and office facilities in a way that would create synergies between different types of tenants and activities. The concept was innovative for its time, and it required partners who were willing to embrace a vision that hadn't been fully tested in the Manhattan market. Working with architect Scott, Donald began developing plans that would push the boundaries of what was considered possible in Manhattan construction. The building would rise 58 stories, making it one of the tallest residential towers in the city, but height alone wasn't enough to distinguish the project. The design incorporated a stunning 6-story atrium featuring pink marble surfaces and an 80-foot waterfall that would become an instant tourist attraction and architectural landmark. The design process revealed Donald's emerging understanding of the psychology of luxury marketing. Every element of the building was conceived not just for functional purposes, but for the emotional impact it would have on residents, visitors, and passers-by. The waterfall wasn't just decorative, it created a sense of movement and energy that made the space feel alive and dynamic. The pink marble wasn't just expensive, it created a warm, welcoming atmosphere that contrasted dramatically with the cold, institutional feeling of most office and residential buildings. But the most innovative aspect of the Trump Tower concept was the integration of high-end retail space into the base of the building. Rather than simply renting ground floor space to whatever businesses were willing to pay the highest rent, Donald curated a collection of luxury retailers that would enhance the building's overall prestige and attract the kind of affluent customers who might also be interested in purchasing residential units in the tower above. The construction process itself became a masterclass in project management, public relations, and crisis resolution. Building in the heart of Manhattan presented challenges that simply didn't exist in the outer boroughs or even in less densely developed parts of the city. Every truck delivery had to be coordinated with traffic patterns. Every construction activity had to be scheduled around the needs of neighboring businesses, and every aspect of the project was subject to intense scrutiny from media, city officials, and competitors who were watching to see if Donald could deliver on his ambitious promises. The logistics were staggering. Concrete had to be delivered during carefully coordinated time windows to avoid disrupting Fifth Avenue traffic. Steel beams had to be lifted into place using cranes that required street closures and elaborate safety protocols. The marble for the atrium had to be quarried in Italy, shipped across the Atlantic, and then carefully transported through Manhattan streets to the construction site. Each phase of the project required the coordination of dozens of contractors, hundreds of workers, and countless city agencies and regulatory bodies. Donald approached these challenges with a combination of hands-on management and strategic delegation that reflected his growing sophistication as a developer. He spent significant time on the construction site, not just observing the work, but learning the details of every trade and understanding the interdependencies between different phases of the project. This direct involvement allowed him to identify potential problems before they became serious delays and to make decisions quickly when unexpected issues arose. But he also understood that successful project management required surrounding himself with competent professionals who could handle the technical aspects of construction while he focused on the broader strategic and public relations challenges. The team he assembled for Trump Tower included some of the most respected names in Manhattan construction, and their expertise allowed him to maintain confidence that the project would be completed to the highest standards, even as he devoted increasing attention to marketing and promotion. The marketing of Trump Tower began long before the building was completed, and it represented a fundamental shift in how luxury real estate was promoted in Manhattan. Rather than simply listing specifications and amenities, Donald created a narrative around the building that emphasized lifestyle, prestige, and exclusivity. Potential buyers weren't just purchasing apartments, they were joining a community of successful, sophisticated individuals who appreciated the finest things in life. The sales process itself became a form of theater, with elaborate presentation materials, carefully staged model units, and personal sales pitches that emphasized the unique advantages of living in what Donald was already calling the most desirable address in Manhattan. He understood that wealthy buyers weren't just making rational economic decisions about their housing needs. They were making emotional decisions about how they wanted to live and how they wanted to be perceived by others. The celebrity residents who began purchasing units in Trump Tower provided invaluable validation for Donald's marketing strategy. When well known figures from entertainment, business, and society chose to make Trump Tower their home, it sent a powerful message to other potential buyers about the building's status and desirability. Each high profile sale generated media attention that was worth far more than traditional advertising could have provided. But perhaps the most significant resident of Trump Tower was Donald himself. He designed a magnificent penthouse apartment on the top floors of the building, creating a living space that would serve not just as his home, but as a symbol of his success and a showcase for his taste and lifestyle. The penthouse, with its gold plated fixtures, marble surfaces, and spectacular views of Central Park and the Manhattan skyline, became an integral part of the Trump brand and a setting for countless media interviews and social events. The decision to live in Trump Tower was more than just practical. It was a statement of confidence in his own creation and a demonstration that he was willing to stake his personal reputation on the quality and desirability of what he had built. When potential buyers visited the building, they could see that the developer himself had chosen to make it his home, which provided a level of credibility that no amount of marketing materials could have achieved. The retail component of Trump Tower proved to be just as successful as the residential units, attracting prestigious tenants who understood that association with the Trump brand could enhance their own marketing efforts. The atrium became a popular destination for tourists and New Yorkers alike, creating foot traffic that benefited all the retailers in the building while also serving as a constant advertisement for the residential units above. The financial success of Trump Tower exceeded even Donald's optimistic projections. The combination of premium pricing for the residential units, substantial rental income from the retail and office space, and the tax advantages associated with the development's structure created cash flows that provided the foundation for even more ambitious future projects. But beyond the immediate financial returns, Trump Tower established Donald as more than just a successful developer. It made him a brand. The building's success generated a constant stream of media coverage that kept Donald's name in the public eye and associated it with luxury, innovation, and success. Magazine articles, television segments, and newspaper features about Trump Tower invariably focused as much on its creator as on the building itself, creating a level of personal recognition that most developers never achieved regardless of their professional accomplishments. When Trump Tower officially opened in 1983, it represented far more than the completion of a construction project. It marked Donald's arrival as a major force in Manhattan real estate and his emergence as a public figure whose name was becoming synonymous with luxury and success. The boy from Queens had not only conquered Manhattan, he had created a monument to his own ambition that would serve as his headquarters, his home, and his most visible symbol for decades to come. The lessons learned from Trump Tower would guide every subsequent project Donald undertook. He had discovered that successful development required not just technical expertise and financial resources, but also the ability to create compelling narratives, manage complex public relations challenges, and build personal brands that could transcend individual projects. These insights would prove invaluable as he set his sights on even more ambitious goals and began expanding beyond traditional real estate development into new industries and markets. The foundation of the Trump empire had been laid in stone, steel, and pink marble. The name that had once been known only in the outer boroughs of New York was now emblazoned in gold letters on one of the most prestigious addresses in the world. Donald Trump had become exactly what he had always believed he was destined to be, a major player on the world's most competitive stage, with the success of Trump Tower serving as proof that his ambitions had been justified and his confidence well founded. As we continue following this remarkable journey, we can see how each success built upon the previous one, creating momentum that would carry Donald Trump from real estate development into entertainment, from entertainment into politics, and ultimately to heights of fame and influence that even his most ambitious or early dreams could not have imagined. But all of it began here, with a young man's vision of a tower that would bear his name and serve as a monument to the power of American ambition and determination. As the 1980s unfolded, Donald Trump found himself riding a wave of success that seemed to grow stronger with each passing year. Trump Tower had established him as a Manhattan developer of consequence, but he was already looking beyond real estate toward opportunities that could expand his influence and diversify his growing empire. The decade would test his ability to manage multiple ventures simultaneously while maintaining the public profile that had become so crucial to his business success. The entertainment industry beckoned with its promise of glamour, media attention, and the kind of celebrity status that could enhance every other aspect of his business operations. Donald had observed how successful businessmen like Hugh Hefner and Steve Wynn had leveraged entertainment ventures to build personal brands that transcended their core industries. He began exploring opportunities that would allow him to apply his understanding of luxury marketing and public relations to ventures beyond traditional real estate development. Atlantic City presented itself as the perfect laboratory for this expansion. The seaside resort town had recently legalized gambling, creating opportunities for developers who could navigate the complex regulatory environment while building the kind of spectacular facilities that would attract high rolling customers from New York, Philadelphia, and beyond. The casino industry combined real estate development with entertainment, hospitality, and the kind of high stakes glamour that perfectly matched Donald's emerging public persona. The decision to enter the casino business wasn't made lightly. Donald understood that gaming operations required expertise he didn't possess, regulatory approvals that could take years to obtain, and capital investments that dwarfed even his most ambitious real estate projects. But he also recognized that successful casinos generated cash flows that could fund expansion into other markets and industries while providing the kind of public visibility that enhanced his overall brand value. The regulatory process for obtaining gaming licenses in New Jersey was exhaustive and invasive, requiring detailed disclosure of financial information, business relationships, and personal history that most developers had never faced. Donald approached these requirements with characteristic thoroughness, assembling teams of lawyers and consultants who specialized in gaming law and understood how to present applications in ways that would satisfy regulatory concerns while protecting his business interests. The negotiations with potential partners revealed Donald's growing sophistication in structuring complex business relationships. Rather than simply seeking investors who could provide capital, he looked for partners who brought operational expertise, regulatory experience, and established relationships within the gaming industry. These partnerships allowed him to move more quickly than would have been possible if he had tried to develop gaming expertise internally, while also managing his expanding real estate operations. Holiday Inns became his primary partner in Atlantic City, bringing hotel management expertise and financial resources that complemented Donald's development skills and marketing abilities. The partnership structure they negotiated gave Donald significant control over design and marketing decisions, while providing Holiday Inns with the operational responsibility for day to day casino management. This arrangement allowed Donald to focus on the aspects of the business where his talents were most valuable, while relying on experienced partners to handle the technical complexities of gaming operations. The design and construction of Trump Plaza required applying lessons learned from Trump Tower to a completely different type of facility. Casinos needed to create an atmosphere of excitement and luxury, while also incorporating the practical requirements of gaming operations, security systems, and regulatory compliance. Donald worked with architects and designers who specialized in gaming facilities, but he insisted on incorporating the same attention to visual impact and emotional psychology that had made Trump Tower so successful. The marketing of Trump Plaza began months before the facility opened, with Donald using his growing media savvy to generate anticipation and excitement among potential customers. He understood that casinos succeeded not just by offering gambling opportunities, but by creating destinations that provided complete entertainment experiences. The promotion of Trump Plaza emphasized not just the gaming facilities, but the restaurants, shows, shopping, and luxury accommodations that would make visits memorable and encourage repeat customers. The opening of Trump Plaza in 1984 marked Donald's successful entry into the gaming industry, but it was only the beginning of his Atlantic City expansion. The success of the first casino provided the credibility and cash flow necessary to pursue additional opportunities, and Donald quickly began planning what would become an even more ambitious project: the Trump Taj Mahal, which he envisioned as the largest and most spectacular casino in Atlantic City. The Taj Mahal project required taking on significantly more risk than Trump Plaza had involved. The scale of the facility, the complexity of its design, and the amount of capital required all exceeded anything Donald had previously attempted. But the potential rewards were equally substantial, and he believed that his track record of successful projects had earned him the credibility necessary to attract the financing and partnerships required for such an ambitious undertaking. The acquisition of the unfinished Taj Mahal property from Resorts International involved complex negotiations with multiple parties, including creditors, shareholders, and competing developers who were also interested in the asset. Donald's ability to structure creative financing arrangements and his reputation for completing projects on schedule and within budget ultimately gave him the advantage in securing control of what would become his most ambitious casino development. The construction challenges associated with completing the Taj Mahal were enormous, requiring coordination of thousands of workers, hundreds of contractors, and dozens of regulatory agencies, while maintaining the kind of quality standards that would justify the facility's positioning as Atlantic City's premier gaming destination. Donald applied the project management skills he had developed during Trump Tower construction, but the scale and complexity of the casino project tested those abilities in new ways. The financing structure for the Taj Mahal relied heavily on high yield bonds that provided the capital necessary to complete construction, but also created substantial debt service obligations that would need to be met regardless of the facility's operating performance. This financing approach reflected Donald's confidence in the project's potential profitability, but it also created financial pressures that would prove challenging if gaming revenues didn't meet projections. The tragic helicopter crash in 1989 that killed three key executives involved in Trump's casino operations created both personal grief and practical challenges that tested Donald's ability to maintain operations during a crisis. The loss of experienced managers during a critical phase of the Taj Mahal's development required rapid reorganization of responsibilities and the recruitment of replacement executives who could maintain momentum toward the facility's planned opening. The impact of this tragedy extended beyond the immediate operational challenges. The executives who died had been instrumental in developing relationships with key vendors, contractors, and regulatory officials, and their loss created gaps in institutional knowledge that were difficult to replace quickly. Donald found himself more directly involved in day-to-day casino operations than he had originally planned, requiring him to develop expertise in areas where he had previously relied on experienced subordinates. Despite these challenges, the Trump Taj Mahal opened in 1990 as planned, featuring the kind of spectacular design and amenities that Donald had promised investors and customers. The facility's opening generated enormous media attention and attracted record crowds of visitors eager to experience what was being promoted as the eighth wonder of the world. The initial success seemed to validate Donald's vision and justify the risks he had taken to complete the project. But the broader economic environment was changing in ways that would test the viability of the high-debt financing structure that had made the Taj Mahal possible. A recession was beginning to impact consumer spending on entertainment and travel, interest rates were rising, and competition from new gaming facilities in other states was beginning to erode Atlantic City's monopoly position in the Northeast gaming market. The combination of high debt service costs and declining gaming revenues created financial pressures that would soon require difficult decisions about the future of Donald's casino operations. The success that had seemed so certain during the construction and opening phases was beginning to look more fragile as economic realities set in, and the limitations of the high leverage financing model became apparent. Meanwhile, Donald's personal life was also becoming more complex and public during this period. His marriage to Ivana had produced 3 children and created a powerful business partnership, but the pressures of managing multiple high profile ventures while maintaining an increasingly public lifestyle were creating strains that would soon become impossible to ignore. The tabloid press had discovered that Donald's personal life was as interesting to readers as his business activities, and the attention was becoming both an asset and a liability. The media coverage of Donald's business success had initially focused primarily on his professional achievements and the spectacular properties he was developing. But as his public profile grew, journalists and photographers became increasingly interested in his lifestyle, his relationships, and the personal dynamics that drove his relentless pursuit of bigger and more ambitious projects. This shift in media attention required Donald to develop new skills in managing personal publicity while protecting his family's privacy and maintaining focus on his business operations. He discovered that celebrity status brought opportunities for expansion into new markets and industries, but it also created vulnerabilities that could impact his business relationships and financial arrangements. The late 1980s represented the peak of Donald's initial business success, with Trump Tower established as a Manhattan landmark, his casino operations generating substantial revenues, and his personal brand becoming increasingly valuable as a marketing tool for future ventures. But the foundation of this success was built on assumptions about continued economic growth, stable interest rates, and expanding gaming markets that would soon be tested by changing economic conditions. As we continue following this remarkable journey, we can see how each success created new opportunities, but also new risks and responsibilities. The young man who had started with a single hotel renovation was now managing a complex empire that spanned multiple industries and required constant attention to both operational details and strategic planning. The lessons learned during this period of rapid expansion would prove crucial as Donald faced the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead in the turbulent decade of the 1990s. The empire was growing, the brand was strengthening, and the ambitions were expanding. But the real tests of leadership, resilience, and adaptability were still to come, as Donald Trump learned that success in America required not just the ability to build, but also the ability to survive, adapt, and reinvent when circumstances demanded change. The early 1990s arrived like a cold wind across Donald Trump's expanding empire, carrying with it economic realities that would test everything he had built during the exuberant decade that preceded it. The recession that began in 1990 wasn't just another business cycle downturn. It was a fundamental shift that would challenge the high leverage financing model that had made his rapid expansion possible and force him to confront the difference between paper wealth and actual liquidity. The first warning signs appeared in the casino operations that had seemed so promising just months earlier. Atlantic City's gaming revenues began declining as the national economy slowed and discretionary spending on entertainment and travel decreased. The competition from newly legalized gaming in other states was accelerating, drawing customers away from New Jersey's casinos toward more convenient options closer to their homes. The monopoly that had made Atlantic City so attractive was rapidly eroding. The debt service obligations on the Trump Taj Mahal were enormous, structured during a period of optimism when gaming revenues seemed certain to grow indefinitely. The high yield bonds that had financed the project's completion required regular interest payments that didn't adjust downward when revenues declined. Donald found himself in the position that had destroyed many other developers before him, owing more money than his properties could generate in current market conditions. The banking relationships that had seemed so solid during the expansion years began showing strain as lenders grew nervous about their exposure to commercial real estate and gaming properties. The same bankers who had competed for the opportunity to finance Trump projects were now requiring additional collateral, personal guarantees, and more restrictive loan terms that limited Donald's flexibility in managing his operations. The financial pressure wasn't limited to the casino operations. The Plaza Hotel in Manhattan, which Donald had purchased in 1988 for what many considered an inflated price, was struggling to generate sufficient revenue to cover its debt service. The luxury hotel market was particularly vulnerable to economic downturns as business travel declined and wealthy individuals reduced their discretionary spending on premium accommodations. Personal financial disclosure requirements revealed the extent to which Donald's wealth was tied to the performance of his business ventures rather than liquid assets that could provide stability during difficult periods. The net worth calculations that had made him appear extraordinarily wealthy were based largely on estimated values of properties that were now declining in market value while continuing to generate substantial debt service obligations. The media coverage of Donald's financial difficulties marked a significant shift in how he was portrayed in newspapers, magazines, and television programs. The same journalists who had celebrated his business acumen during the 1980s now focused on his debt levels, cash flow problems, and the potential for bankruptcy proceedings that could dismantle the empire he had spent more than 2 decades building. This change in media tone required Donald to develop new strategies for managing public perception during a crisis. Rather than simply promoting his successes, he now needed to maintain confidence among lenders, partners, and customers while acknowledging the serious challenges facing his operations. The skills he had developed in marketing luxury properties had to be adapted to the more complex task of managing a corporate turnaround under intense public scrutiny. The negotiations with creditors revealed both Donald's vulnerability and his resilience. The banks and bondholders who held his debt had little interest in forcing bankruptcy proceedings that might result in substantial losses on their investments. Instead, they were willing to work with him to restructure payment terms, reduce interest rates, and modify loan covenants in ways that could allow his properties to survive the downturn and eventually return to profitability. These restructuring negotiations required Donald to accept significant restrictions on his business operations and personal lifestyle while providing creditors with enhanced security and oversight of his financial decisions. The agreements typically included provisions for professional management of distressed properties, limitations on additional borrowing, and requirements for regular financial reporting that gave lenders unprecedented visibility into his business operations. The process of working through these financial difficulties provided Donald with valuable education in crisis management, stakeholder relations, and the practical aspects of corporate restructuring. He learned how to maintain operational control of his properties while acknowledging the legitimate interests of creditors who had provided the capital that made his expansion possible. The restructuring of the Trump Taj Mahal required the most complex negotiations, involving multiple classes of bondholders, bank lenders, trade creditors, and regulatory agencies that oversaw gaming operations. The Chapter 11 bankruptcy filing that ultimately became necessary wasn't an admission of failure, but rather a legal mechanism that provided protection from creditors while allowing the casino to continue operating under court supervision. The bankruptcy process itself became an education in the intersection of law, finance, and public relations. Donald discovered that bankruptcy proceedings were highly technical legal processes that required specialized expertise, but they were also public relations challenges that could impact the long-term viability of his brand and his ability to attract customers and business partners in the future. The emergence from bankruptcy required demonstrating to the court, creditors, and regulatory agencies that the reorganized business would be viable under the new financial structure. This involved developing realistic projections for gaming revenues, implementing cost reduction measures that could improve profitability, and establishing management systems that would provide creditors with confidence in the property's future performance. The personal toll of the financial crisis extended beyond the business challenges to impact Donald's family relationships and social standing. The public nature of his financial difficulties created embarrassment and stress that affected his marriage to Ivana and his relationships with longtime friends and business associates who had invested their own reputations in supporting his ventures. The divorce proceedings with Ivana became a media spectacle that further complicated Donald's efforts to manage the financial crisis while maintaining his public image. The negotiation of divorce terms occurred simultaneously with creditor negotiations, creating additional pressure on his personal finances and requiring careful coordination to avoid conflicts between different legal proceedings. The settlement with Ivana ultimately provided her with substantial assets and ongoing support payments, but it also allowed Donald to maintain control of the business operations that would be crucial to his financial recovery. The agreement reflected the complex intersection of personal and business interests that characterized many aspects of Donald's life during this difficult period. Despite the financial turmoil, Donald's core real estate assets in Manhattan continued to generate revenue and maintain their market value better than the casino and hotel properties that had created the most serious problems. Trump Tower remained a prestigious address with strong rental income from both residential and commercial tenants, providing a stable foundation that helps support the overall enterprise during the restructuring process. The management of these core properties during the crisis revealed Donald's growing sophistication in differentiating between various types of real estate investments and their relative risks and returns. The steady income from established Manhattan properties provided crucial cash flow that could be used to service debt and fund operations, while the more speculative casino investments were being restructured. The experience of surviving near bankruptcy while maintaining control of his core business operations reinforced Donald's belief in the importance of preserving personal brand value even during periods of financial distress. He understood that his ability to recover and grow again would depend significantly on maintaining public confidence in his capabilities as a developer and businessman. The gradual stabilization of his financial situation during the mid 1990s provided Donald with the opportunity to apply lessons learned during the crisis to future business decisions. He developed a more conservative approach to leverage, a greater emphasis on cash flow generation versus asset appreciation, and a deeper understanding of the importance of maintaining financial flexibility to weather unexpected economic downturns. The recovery also coincided with improvements in the broader real estate and gaming markets that made his existing properties more valuable and created new opportunities for expansion. The same economic cycles that had created the crisis were now working in his favor, providing validation for his decision to fight through the difficulties rather than simply liquidating assets and starting over. The launch of Trump Hotels and Casino Resorts as a publicly traded company in 1995 represented a significant milestone in Donald's financial recovery. The initial public offering provided access to capital markets while allowing him to maintain operational control of the casino properties that had been restructured during the bankruptcy proceedings. The public company structure also provided enhanced credibility with lenders, partners, and customers who could now evaluate the performance of Donald's casino operations through publicly available financial statements and regulatory filings. This transparency helped rebuild confidence that had been damaged during the financial crisis while providing a platform for future growth. The success of the public offering validated Donald's strategy of working through financial difficulties rather than simply walking away from troubled properties. The investors who purchased shares in the new company were betting that his operational expertise and brand recognition could generate superior returns in the gaming industry, despite the challenges that had led to the earlier bankruptcies. But even as his casino operations stabilized and began generating positive returns for public shareholders, Donald was already exploring opportunities to diversify his business interests and reduce his dependence on any single industry or market. The financial crisis had taught him valuable lessons about the importance of maintaining multiple revenue streams and avoiding excessive concentration in cyclical businesses. The expansion into licensing and branding opportunities represented a fundamentally different approach to business development that leveraged Donald's growing name recognition without requiring the same level of capital investment that had created problems during the early 1990s. By licensing the Trump name to other developers, he could generate revenue while allowing others to assume the construction and market risks associated with new projects. This shift toward asset-light business models reflected Donald's growing understanding of how to monetize brand value while maintaining financial flexibility. The licensing fees and management contracts that became increasingly important to his business generated steady income streams that were less vulnerable to economic cycles than the underlying real estate assets. The development of licensing relationships also required Donald to establish quality standards and approval processes that would protect the Trump brand while giving licensees sufficient flexibility to adapt projects to local market conditions. This balance between brand control and operational flexibility became a crucial skill as he expanded into new markets and property types. The media coverage of Donald's financial recovery focused as much on his personal resilience as on the specific business strategies that had enabled the turnaround. The narrative of near bankruptcy, followed by successful recovery, became an important part of his public image, demonstrating an ability to overcome adversity that would prove valuable in future business and political endeavors. The lessons learned during this period of financial crisis and recovery would influence Donald's approach to risk management, debt financing, and business development for the rest of his career. He had discovered that survival in highly competitive industries required not just vision and ambition, but also financial discipline, stakeholder management skills, and the psychological resilience necessary to maintain confidence during extended periods of uncertainty. As the 1990s progressed and his financial situation continued to improve, Donald found himself in a stronger position than ever before. The empire that had nearly collapsed was not only rebuilt, but restructured in ways that provided greater stability and more diverse revenue sources. The experience of surviving near bankruptcy had taught him valuable lessons about business management, while also enhancing his reputation for resilience and determination. The stage was now set for the next phase of Donald's remarkable journey, one that would take him beyond traditional real estate development into entertainment, media, and eventually politics. The foundation had been tested by crisis and had proven strong enough to support even greater ambitions. The young man from Queens who had conquered Manhattan was now ready to take on the world. The dawn of the new millennium brought with it a sense of renewal and possibility that seemed tailor-made for Donald Trump's evolving ambitions. The financial storms of the early 1990s had passed, leaving behind a more seasoned businessman who understood both the intoxicating heights of success and the sobering reality of near collapse. But rather than retreating into conservative strategies, Donald found himself drawn toward an entirely new frontier, the world of entertainment and media, where his natural instincts for showmanship could flourish on a scale he had never before imagined. The idea of television wasn't entirely foreign to him. Throughout his real estate career, Donald had demonstrated an almost supernatural ability to attract media attention, turning routine business announcements into front-page stories and transforming construction sites into tourist destinations. He understood something fundamental about the American psyche that many successful businessmen missed entirely. People weren't just interested in buildings or deals, they were fascinated by the personalities behind them, the human drama that unfolded in boardrooms and on construction sites. This insight would prove crucial as he began exploring opportunities in reality television, a genre that was still in its infancy but showed enormous potential for combining entertainment with business education. The concept that would eventually become The Apprentice wasn't born from a desire to become a television star, but rather from a recognition that his natural teaching style and business philosophy could resonate with audiences who were hungry for authentic insights into how success actually worked in the real world. The development process for what would become The Apprentice required Donald to articulate his business philosophy in ways he had never attempted before. Television demanded clarity, simplicity, and the ability to distill complex business concepts into memorable moments that could hold viewer attention across commercial breaks and multiple episodes. This wasn't just about entertaining people, it was about educating them while keeping them engaged in a competitive format that would showcase both business acumen and human psychology. The casting process for the show revealed Donald's growing understanding of how personality dynamics could create compelling television while also demonstrating genuine business principles. The contestants weren't just ambitious individuals competing for a job, they were representatives of different approaches to leadership, teamwork, and problem solving that would resonate with viewers facing similar challenges in their own careers. The boardroom became Donald's natural habitat, a space where his years of experience in high stakes negotiations could be displayed in ways that were both educational and entertaining. The format allowed him to demonstrate real business decision making processes while creating dramatic tension that kept audiences invested in the outcomes. Each firing wasn't just the elimination of a contestant, it was a teaching moment about accountability, performance standards, and the sometimes harsh realities of business leadership. The phrase, "you're fired," emerged naturally from Donald's direct communication style, but it quickly became something more significant than a simple elimination announcement. It represented a philosophy about business leadership that emphasized clear expectations, honest feedback, and decisive action when performance standards weren't met. The phrase resonated with viewers because it captured something authentic about how successful businesses actually operated without the political correctness that often obscured real workplace dynamics. The success of The Apprentice exceeded everyone's expectations, including Donald's own. The show didn't just attract large audiences, it created a cultural phenomenon that elevated Donald from successful businessman to genuine celebrity. The distinction was crucial because celebrity status provided access to opportunities and influence that even substantial wealth couldn't guarantee. Television had transformed him from someone who was known primarily within business and real estate circles into a household name recognized by millions of Americans who had never heard of Trump Tower or his casino operations. But the impact of the show extended far beyond entertainment value or personal recognition. The Apprentice provided Donald with a platform to demonstrate his business philosophy and leadership style to a mass audience over multiple seasons and hundreds of hours of programming. Viewers formed relationships with the television version of Donald Trump that felt personal and authentic, even though they were based on carefully edited and produced content designed for maximum dramatic impact. The production process itself became an education in media management, storytelling, and the complex relationship between reality and entertainment. Donald learned how television could shape public perception in ways that traditional public relations efforts could never achieve. But he also discovered the challenges of maintaining authenticity while working within the constraints of network television and advertiser expectations. The financial success of The Apprentice provided Donald with a new revenue stream that was completely independent of real estate markets, interest rates, or construction cycles. The guaranteed income from television production allowed him to take greater risks in his business ventures while also providing the financial stability necessary to weather any future economic downturns without the kind of crisis he had experienced in the early 1990s. The show's success also opened doors to additional entertainment opportunities, licensing deals, and business partnerships that leveraged his growing celebrity status. The Trump brand became valuable not just for real estate projects, but for any product or service that could benefit from association with success, luxury, and business expertise. This expansion of brand value represented a fundamental shift in how Donald approached business development and revenue generation. The celebrity status that came with television success also created new challenges and responsibilities. Every public appearance, business decision, and personal relationship was now subject to intense media scrutiny that went far beyond the business press coverage he had experienced during his real estate career. The skills required to manage this level of public attention were different from those needed for property development or casino operations. The impact on his personal life was equally significant. The television show had made Donald a public figure whose family relationships, social activities, and lifestyle choices were considered newsworthy by entertainment media as well as business publications. This level of attention created both opportunities and constraints that affected every aspect of his life outside the business world. The relationship with NBC and the production team behind The Apprentice also provided Donald with valuable insights into how major media companies operated, how programming decisions were made, and how audience research influenced content development. This education in media business would prove valuable as he continued expanding his entertainment activities and building relationships within the industry. The success of The Apprentice during its peak years coincided with continued growth in Donald's core real estate business, creating a period of unprecedented success and public recognition. The television show provided a platform for promoting his development projects, while the real estate success validated the business expertise he demonstrated on television. The synergy between these different aspects of his career created momentum that accelerated his expansion into new markets and opportunities. The international versions of The Apprentice that were developed in multiple countries extended Donald's brand recognition globally while providing additional revenue streams and licensing opportunities. The format proved adaptable to different cultures and business environments, demonstrating the universal appeal of the competition structure and business education elements that made the original show successful. But perhaps most importantly, The Apprentice established Donald as more than just a successful businessman. It positioned him as a teacher, a leader, and a symbol of American entrepreneurship that resonated with audiences who aspired to achieve similar success in their own careers. The show created an emotional connection between Donald and millions of viewers who saw him not just as a wealthy developer, but as someone who understood their ambitions and could provide guidance on achieving their goals. The production schedule for The Apprentice required Donald to balance television commitments with his ongoing business operations, a challenge that tested his time management skills and ability to delegate responsibilities to trusted associates. The show's success was dependent on his personal involvement and authentic participation, which meant he couldn't simply treat it as a passive licensing opportunity. The boardroom scenes required careful preparation and genuine business insight, as contestants presented real projects and faced actual business challenges that demanded thoughtful evaluation and feedback. Donald's responses couldn't be scripted in advance because the competitive dynamics and project outcomes were determined by the contestants' actual performance rather than predetermined storylines. The mentoring relationships that developed with some contestants extended beyond the show itself, creating ongoing business relationships and partnerships that demonstrated the authentic educational value of the program. These relationships provided evidence that The Apprentice was more than just entertainment. It was a genuine platform for developing business talent and creating opportunities for ambitious individuals. The cultural impact of The Apprentice extended into business schools, corporate training programs, and entrepreneurship education, where episodes were used as case studies and teaching tools. The show had successfully bridged the gap between entertainment and education in ways that made business concepts accessible to general audiences while maintaining sufficient depth and authenticity to be valuable for serious business students. The charitable components of the Celebrity Apprentice seasons added another dimension to Donald's public image, demonstrating his commitment to supporting various causes while providing celebrities with platforms to raise money and awareness for their chosen charities. These episodes showcased a different side of his personality while maintaining the competitive format and business focus that made the original show successful. The longevity of the Apprentice franchise, spanning more than a decade and multiple format variations, established Donald as a permanent fixture in American popular culture rather than a temporary celebrity whose fame might fade when the show ended. The sustained success demonstrated that his appeal to audiences was based on more than just novelty or entertainment value. The skills and relationships developed through The Apprentice would prove invaluable as Donald began considering opportunities beyond business and entertainment. The show had provided him with a platform to communicate with millions of Americans, to demonstrate leadership under pressure, and to build the kind of personal brand that could support ambitions in virtually any field he chose to pursue. The confidence and public speaking abilities that were refined through hundreds of hours of television production prepared Donald for the kind of public life that few businessmen ever experience. The comfort with cameras, microphones, and live audiences that came from television work would serve him well regardless of what challenges and opportunities lay ahead in his remarkable journey. As The Apprentice continued its successful run, Donald found himself at another crossroads with more options and greater influence than ever before in his career. The foundation that had been built through real estate development had been strengthened by surviving financial crisis, and now it was being elevated to new heights through the power of television and celebrity. The next chapter of his life would build upon all of these experiences while taking him into territory that even his most ambitious early dreams had never envisioned. The boy from Queens had become the man from Manhattan, and now he was becoming something entirely new, a figure whose influence extended far beyond business into the broader cultural and political conversations that shaped American society. The stage was set for the most remarkable transformation yet in a life that had already defied conventional expectations and redefined what was possible for someone willing to dream big and work relentlessly to achieve those dreams. The lights were getting brighter, the stages were getting bigger, and Donald Trump was discovering that celebrity could be both a powerful tool and a demanding master. By the mid 2000s, The Apprentice had transformed him from a New York real estate developer into a global brand. But with that transformation came responsibilities and opportunities he had never anticipated. The young man who had once walked construction sites in Queens was now walking red carpets in Hollywood, and every step was being watched by millions of people around the world. The success of the television show had created something unprecedented in his career, a direct relationship with the American public that bypassed traditional media filters and business intermediaries. For the first time, his success wasn't dependent solely on convincing bankers, city officials, or business partners. He was now accountable to viewers who tuned in each week, formed opinions about his decisions, and developed personal connections to his brand that transcended any single project or investment. This shift required him to think differently about every aspect of his public life. The casual comments that might have been overlooked when he was primarily known within business circles now became headline news when spoken by someone with prime-time television visibility. The luxury lifestyle that had always been part of his personal brand was now scrutinized not just by business journalists, but by entertainment reporters who analyzed everything from his fashion choices to his social activities. The expansion into Celebrity Apprentice represented both an evolution of the show's format and a deepening of Donald's understanding of how celebrity culture operated in America. Working with established entertainers, athletes, and public figures provided insights into different approaches to fame management, brand development, and public relations that complemented his business experience with new perspectives on influence and persuasion. The charity component of Celebrity Apprentice added complexity to the show's dynamics, while also demonstrating Donald's growing comfort with addressing social issues and public causes. The format required him to evaluate not just business performance, but also the charitable impact of contestants' efforts, creating opportunities to showcase values and priorities that extended beyond profit maximization and deal-making success. The relationships formed with celebrity contestants often extended beyond the show itself, creating a network of entertainment industry connections that would prove valuable as Donald continued expanding his media presence and exploring new opportunities for brand development. These relationships provided access to different audiences and markets while also offering insights into how various industries approached marketing, public relations, and audience engagement. The international expansion of the Apprentice franchise demonstrated the global appeal of Donald's business philosophy and communication style, but it also revealed the challenges of adapting American business concepts to different cultural contexts and regulatory environments. The success of international versions validated the universal aspects of his approach while highlighting the importance of local adaptation and cultural sensitivity. The licensing opportunities that emerged from the show's success extended far beyond traditional real estate development, creating revenue streams from products and services that leverage the Trump brand without requiring direct operational involvement. This evolution toward asset light business models reflected lessons learned from earlier financial challenges, while also providing greater flexibility to pursue new opportunities without the capital constraints that had limited previous expansion efforts. The media training that came naturally through years of television production enhanced Donald's ability to communicate complex ideas clearly and persuasively across different formats and audiences. The skills developed in the controlled environment of television production translated effectively to press conferences, interviews, and public speaking engagements that became increasingly important as his public profile continued to grow. The production schedule for The Apprentice required maintaining involvement in multiple business ventures while meeting the demanding requirements of television programming, a balancing act that tested his organizational abilities and delegation skills. The show's success depended on his authentic participation, which meant he couldn't simply treat it as a passive endorsement opportunity, but needed to remain genuinely engaged with the competitive process and educational content. The boardroom dynamics that made the show compelling required Donald to make real decisions with actual consequences for contestants while also creating entertainment value for viewers. This dual responsibility demanded a sophisticated understanding of both business principles and human psychology, as each elimination needed to be both educationally valuable and dramatically satisfying. The cultural impact of The Apprentice extended into business education, with episodes being used in corporate training programs and entrepreneurship courses as case studies for leadership development and decision making processes. The show had successfully bridged the gap between entertainment and education in ways that made business concepts accessible to general audiences while maintaining sufficient depth to be valuable for serious business study. The catchphrase, "You're fired," became embedded in American popular culture, representing not just a television moment, but a philosophy about accountability and performance standards that resonated with audiences across different industries and career levels. The phrase's popularity demonstrated how authentic business communication could transcend entertainment contexts to influence broader workplace culture and management practices. The success of The Apprentice during its peak years coincided with continued growth in Donald's real estate portfolio, creating synergies between his television presence and property development activities. The show provided a platform for promoting new projects, while the real estate success validated the business expertise demonstrated on television, creating a reinforcing cycle that accelerated growth in both areas. The global recognition that came with television success opened doors to international business opportunities that might not have been available based solely on his real estate track record. The Trump brand became valuable in markets where his specific development experience might not have been relevant, but where his reputation for business success and luxury standards could attract partners and customers. The transition from businessman to celebrity required developing new skills in personal brand management that went beyond traditional public relations and marketing strategies. The constant media attention meant that every public appearance, business decision, and personal relationship was potentially newsworthy, requiring careful consideration of how various activities might be perceived by different audiences. The financial success of The Apprentice provided Donald with resources and flexibility that allowed him to pursue more ambitious real estate projects while also exploring opportunities in other industries. The steady income from television production created a financial foundation that reduced dependence on construction loans and development financing, providing greater autonomy in project selection and timing. The experience of working with network television executives, production companies, and entertainment industry professionals provided valuable insights into how major media companies operated and made programming decisions. This education in media business would prove useful as Donald continued building relationships within the industry and exploring additional entertainment opportunities. The audience research and feedback that came with television success provided Donald with unprecedented insights into how the American public perceived his personality, leadership style, and business philosophy. This information was invaluable for understanding which aspects of his approach resonated most strongly with different demographic groups and how his message might be refined for maximum impact. The Celebrity Apprentice format created opportunities to work with established entertainers and public figures who brought their own audiences and fan bases to the show, expanding the reach of the Trump brand while also providing insights into different approaches to celebrity management and audience engagement. These relationships often extended beyond the show itself, creating ongoing partnerships and collaborations. The charitable component of Celebrity Apprentice seasons allowed Donald to demonstrate support for various causes while maintaining the competitive format that made the show entertaining. The episodes showcased his ability to evaluate not just business performance, but also social impact, adding dimensions to his public image that extended beyond profit-focused business activities. The longevity of the Apprentice franchise established Donald as a permanent fixture in American entertainment rather than a temporary celebrity whose fame might fade when current projects ended. The sustained success over multiple seasons and format variations demonstrated that his appeal was based on authentic characteristics rather than novelty or short-term entertainment value. The skills developed through television production, including comfort with cameras, ability to communicate complex ideas clearly, and experience managing live interactions with diverse groups of people, prepared Donald for increasingly prominent public roles that required sophisticated communication abilities and psychological insight into audience dynamics. As The Apprentice continued its successful run through the late 2000s, Donald found himself positioned uniquely at the intersection of business, entertainment, and popular culture. The show had not only made him wealthy and famous, but it had also provided him with a platform to influence public opinion and demonstrate leadership capabilities to a mass audience over an extended period. The confidence and communication skills that were refined through hundreds of hours of television production would prove invaluable regardless of what future challenges and opportunities emerged in his remarkable journey. The foundation that had been built through real estate development and strengthened through surviving a financial crisis was now being elevated to unprecedented heights through the power of mass media and celebrity culture. The boy from Queens, who had become the man from Manhattan, was now evolving into something entirely new, a cultural figure whose influence extended far beyond any single industry or business sector. The lessons learned from television success, combined with decades of business experience and an instinctive understanding of American psychology, were preparing him for roles and responsibilities that would test every skill he had developed throughout his extraordinary career. The stage was set for the next phase of his journey, one that would take him beyond entertainment and business into territories that even his most ambitious early dreams could never have envisioned. The foundation was stronger than ever. The platform was broader than he had ever imagined possible, and the opportunities ahead would require everything he had learned, while also demanding new levels of courage, vision, and determination. The transformation was far from complete, and the most remarkable chapters of this American story were still waiting to be written. But the groundwork had been laid, the skills had been developed, and the confidence necessary to take on the greatest challenges was now firmly in place. The journey that had begun in a queen's mansion was about to enter its most extraordinary phase yet. By 2010, Donald Trump found himself in a position that few businessmen in American history had ever occupied. The combination of real estate success, television fame, and celebrity status had created a unique platform that transcended traditional industry boundaries. But as he approached his mid 60s, something new was stirring within him, a restlessness that couldn't be satisfied by another building project or television season. The man who had conquered Manhattan and dominated primetime television was beginning to contemplate an arena where his unconventional approach might have even greater impact: the world of politics. The seeds of political interest had been planted decades earlier, during those formative years when he learned how real estate development required navigating complex relationships between business and government. Every major project had involved negotiations with city officials, planning commissions, and regulatory agencies. He had observed how political connections could accelerate approvals, how media relationships could influence public opinion, and how personal charisma could sometimes overcome institutional resistance. But television had revealed something even more significant about his political potential. The Apprentice had demonstrated his ability to connect with ordinary Americans across demographic and geographic lines that traditional politicians often struggled to bridge. The show's audience included suburban professionals and urban entrepreneurs, college graduates and high school dropouts, conservatives and liberals who might disagree on policy, but found themselves united in their appreciation for his direct communication style and business success. The economic crisis of 2008 had created a national conversation about leadership, competence, and the relationship between government and business that seemed tailor made for someone with Donald's background and perspective. While career politicians offered familiar talking points and incremental solutions, he could speak from decades of actual experience in creating jobs, managing large organizations, and delivering results under pressure. The birther controversy that emerged during President Obama's first term provided Donald with his first significant opportunity to test his political voice on a national stage. His willingness to raise questions about the president's birth certificate wasn't just about constitutional requirements, it was about demonstrating that he wouldn't be intimidated by political correctness or media criticism when he believed important issues were being overlooked or inadequately addressed. The media response to his birther comments revealed both the opportunities and challenges that would define his political involvement. Traditional news outlets dismissed his concerns as conspiracy theories, but significant portions of the American public found his willingness to ask uncomfortable questions refreshing and authentic. The controversy generated enormous media attention while also demonstrating his ability to influence national political conversations without holding any official position. The experience of being attacked by mainstream media for his political statements provided valuable preparation for the more intense scrutiny that would come with actual candidacy. He learned how to maintain message discipline while under constant criticism, how to use controversial statements to generate attention for broader policy positions, and how to appeal directly to supporters through social media and alternative communication channels. The 2012 presidential election cycle offered another opportunity to explore political involvement without making the full commitment required for an actual campaign. His consideration of a Republican primary challenge to Mitt Romney generated significant media attention and demonstrated the level of interest that his potential candidacy would create among both supporters and opponents. The decision not to run in 2012 was based partly on contractual obligations related to The Apprentice, but it also reflected his understanding that successful political campaigns required the same kind of careful preparation and strategic planning that had made his business ventures successful. He wasn't interested in running a symbolic campaign or making a political statement. If he was going to enter politics, he intended to win. The years between 2012 and 2016 provided additional opportunities to refine his political message and build relationships within conservative circles. His appearances at political events, his commentary on current affairs, and his growing presence on social media platforms created a foundation of support that would prove crucial when he eventually decided to launch an official campaign. The development of his political philosophy drew heavily on lessons learned throughout his business career: the importance of negotiating from strength, the value of unpredictability in deal making, the power of branding and message control, and the understanding that success often required challenging conventional wisdom and established practices. His critique of American trade policies reflected decades of experience competing against international businesses and observing how other countries structured their economic relationships to advantage their own industries and workers. His concerns about immigration policy stemmed from direct experience managing large workforces and understanding how labor market dynamics affected wages and working conditions for American workers. His skepticism about military interventions and nation building projects reflected a businessman's instinct for cost benefit analysis and results oriented evaluation of government programs. His criticism of the political establishment came from an outsider's perspective, on how Washington actually operated compared to how it was supposed to function according to constitutional principles and democratic ideals. The social media revolution provided Donald with communication tools that were perfectly suited to his direct, unfiltered communication style. Twitter allowed him to bypass traditional media gatekeepers and speak directly to supporters and critics without having his message interpreted or edited by journalists who might have their own agendas or biases. His mastery of Twitter as a political communication tool represented a fundamental shift in how political messages could be delivered and received. The platform's character limitations forced him to distill complex policy positions into memorable phrases and powerful images that could be easily shared and understood by audiences with limited time or attention for detailed policy papers. The controversial nature of many of his tweets generated enormous media attention while also demonstrating his willingness to challenge political conventions and speak truths that other politicians might consider too risky or inappropriate. The constant controversy kept him in the news cycle, while also reinforcing his image as someone who couldn't be controlled by political consultants or party establishments. The business empire that he had built over decades provided both resources and credibility for a potential political campaign. His success in real estate development, television production, and brand licensing demonstrated an ability to succeed in multiple industries, while also providing the financial independence necessary to fund a campaign without being beholden to special interests or major donors. The Trump Organization's international operations provided insights into global economic relationships and foreign policy challenges that few politicians possessed through direct experience. His business dealings in countries around the world had given him first-hand knowledge of how different governments approached trade, regulation, and business development. The celebrity status that came with television success meant that his entry into politics would generate immediate media attention and public interest that other candidates would need years to develop. The name recognition and personal brand that had been built through decades of business success and entertainment visibility provided enormous advantages in a political environment where media coverage and public awareness were crucial for campaign success. The family dynamics that had shaped his business career also influenced his approach to political involvement. His children had grown into capable executives who could manage day-to-day business operations while he focused on political activities. Their success in various aspects of the Trump Organization demonstrated the strength of the foundation he had built and the quality of the team that could support his political ambitions. The marriage to Melania had provided him with a partner who understood the demands of public life and celebrity status while also bringing her own perspective on international affairs and cultural issues. Her background as an immigrant who had achieved success in America added dimensions to his personal story that could resonate with diverse audiences. The grandchildren who were beginning to arrive during this period provided additional motivation for his political involvement as he began thinking about the kind of country and world they would inherit. The legacy considerations that had always influenced his business decisions now extended to broader questions about American leadership and the direction of national policy. The economic recovery that followed the 2008 financial crisis had restored the value of his real estate holdings while also validating his long term investment strategies and market timing. The financial stability that came with recovered asset values provided the confidence necessary to take the risks associated with political involvement. The success of his licensing and branding operations had reduced his dependence on active real estate development, while also demonstrating the global appeal of the Trump brand across different cultures and markets. This diversification provided both financial flexibility and international credibility that would be valuable in political contexts. The relationships built through decades of business success, television production, and celebrity activities had created a network of contacts across multiple industries and geographic regions that could provide support, advice, and resources for political activities. These relationships included not just business associates, but also entertainment figures, media personalities, and political operatives who understood various aspects of public life and campaign management. The communication skills that had been refined through television production, media interviews, and public speaking engagements had prepared him for the demanding requirements of political campaigns and public office. The comfort with large audiences, hostile questioning, and live television that came from entertainment industry experience would prove invaluable in political contexts where communication abilities often determined success or failure. The understanding of American psychology that had made The Apprentice successful also provided insights into what messages and themes would resonate with voters who felt disconnected from traditional political establishments and conventional policy approaches. The ability to identify and articulate concerns that other politicians ignored or addressed inadequately would become a crucial advantage in building political support. As 2015 approached, all of these factors were converging to create a unique opportunity for someone with Donald's background, skills, and platform to make a significant impact on American politics. The country was ready for an outsider's perspective. The media environment favored direct communication and controversial statements, and the political establishment seemed vulnerable to challenges from unconventional candidates. The decision to run for president wouldn't be made lightly or impulsively. It would require the same kind of careful planning, strategic thinking, and commitment to excellence that had characterized every major decision throughout his remarkable career. But the foundation had been laid, the skills had been developed, and the platform was in place for what would become the most extraordinary chapter yet in a life that had already defied conventional expectations and redefined what was possible in America. The boy from Queens who had become the man from Manhattan, who had transformed into a television celebrity and global brand, was now preparing to attempt something that no one like him had ever achieved before. The business success, media experience, and celebrity status that had taken decades to build were about to be tested in the ultimate arena of American ambition, the pursuit of the presidency itself. The foundation was solid, the preparation was complete, and the moment was approaching when Donald Trump would step onto the biggest stage of all, seeking not just to win an election, but to transform the very nature of American politics and leadership. The journey that had begun in a Tudor mansion in Queens was about to reach its most remarkable destination yet, as the outsider prepared to challenge the ultimate insiders for control of the most powerful position in the world. On June 16th, 2015, Donald Trump descended the golden escalator in Trump Tower, accompanied by Melania, to make an announcement that would forever alter the trajectory of American politics. The man who had spent decades building skyscrapers was now ready to scale the ultimate mountain. The marble atrium that had once showcased his architectural vision would now serve as the launching pad for his political revolution. The speech he delivered that day wasn't crafted by focus groups or political consultants. It emerged from decades of frustration with what he saw as America's decline, filtered through the direct communication style that had made him a television star. When he spoke about making America great again, he wasn't reading from a teleprompter. He was channeling decades of observations about trade deals, foreign policy, and domestic priorities that he believed were weakening the country he loved. The initial reaction from the political establishment was a mixture of amusement and dismissal. Here was a reality television host with no political experience, attempting to challenge seasoned politicians who had spent their entire careers climbing the traditional ladder of public service. The pundits who filled cable television shows treated his candidacy as a sideshow, a temporary distraction that would fade once serious campaigning began. But they had fundamentally misunderstood both the candidate and the electorate. The skills that had made Donald successful in business and television were perfectly suited to the political environment of 2016. His ability to dominate media coverage, his instinct for understanding what audiences wanted to hear, and his willingness to challenge conventional wisdom all proved to be enormous advantages in a campaign that rewarded authenticity over experience. The early primary debates revealed the extent to which his unconventional approach could disrupt traditional political dynamics. While other candidates delivered carefully rehearsed talking points designed to avoid controversy, Donald spoke directly and often provocatively about issues that resonated with voters who felt ignored by the political establishment. His attacks on political correctness, his criticism of trade deals, and his promises to drain the swamp struck chords that professional politicians had failed to recognize. The media coverage of his campaign was unprecedented in both volume and intensity. Every statement became news, every rally generated headlines, and every controversy created additional opportunities to communicate his message to audiences that might not otherwise pay attention to political campaigns. The same instincts that had made him a master of publicity in business and entertainment now gave him an enormous advantage in the attention economy of modern politics. The rallies themselves became cultural phenomena that transcended traditional political events. The crowds were larger, more enthusiastic, and more diverse than anyone had expected. People drove hundreds of miles to attend, arriving hours early and staying long after the speeches ended. These weren't just political gatherings. They were celebrations of a movement that was larger than any single candidate or campaign. The primary victories came in rapid succession, each one defying predictions and confounding experts who had assumed his support would collapse once voters focused on more conventional candidates. Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada, and Super Tuesday all demonstrated that his appeal extended across different regions, demographics, and political traditions within the Republican Party. The general election campaign against Hillary Clinton represented the ultimate test of whether an outsider could defeat the ultimate insider. She brought decades of political experience, massive fundraising advantages, and the support of virtually every major institution in American politics. But she also represented the very establishment that millions of Americans blamed for the problems facing the country. The debates between them showcased the fundamental choice facing voters. On one side was experience, preparation, and traditional qualifications. On the other was change, disruption, and a promise to govern differently than anyone before. The contrast couldn't have been starker, and it forced every American to decide what kind of leadership they wanted for the future. The campaign's final months were marked by controversies that would have destroyed traditional candidates, but somehow seemed to strengthen his connection with supporters who viewed attacks from the media and political establishment as validation of his outsider status. Every criticism became evidence that he was threatening the very systems that voters wanted to change. Election night unfolded like a real time demonstration of how completely the experts had misunderstood both the candidate and the country. States that were supposed to be safely Democratic fell one by one. Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio all flipped from blue to red as working class voters who had been taken for granted by the Democratic Party chose change over continuity. The victory speech at the Hilton Hotel in Manhattan was delivered by a man who had just achieved something that political science textbooks said was impossible. He had won the presidency without holding elected office, without military experience, without the support of his party's establishment, and despite being outspent and facing overwhelmingly negative media coverage. The transition period revealed the challenges of transforming a political outsider into the leader of the world's most powerful government. Assembling a cabinet, navigating confirmation processes, and preparing to inherit the vast bureaucracy of the federal government required skills that were different from those needed to win elections or manage private enterprises. The inauguration on January 20th, 2017, marked the completion of a journey that had begun 70 years earlier in a Queens mansion. The boy who had played with toy blocks was now taking the oath of office, surrounded by the marble columns of the Capitol. The speech he delivered that day promised to transfer power from Washington back to the American people, continuing the outsider themes that had carried him to victory. The presidency itself tested every skill Donald had developed throughout his remarkable career: the ability to negotiate under pressure, the talent for dominating media coverage, the instinct for understanding public opinion, and the willingness to challenge conventional wisdom all proved essential for governing in an era of intense polarization and rapid change. The policies he implemented reflected the business background that had shaped his worldview. Trade deals were renegotiated with the same attention to leverage and mutual benefit that had characterized his real estate transactions. Regulatory reform was approached with an entrepreneur's understanding of how government rules affected business operations and job creation. The international relationships he built drew upon decades of experience dealing with leaders from different cultures and negotiating agreements that served American interests while maintaining productive partnerships. The same skills that had made Trump Tower attractive to international tenants now helped reshape America's position in global affairs. The rallies continued throughout his presidency, maintaining the direct connection with supporters that had been crucial to his political success. These events served not just as campaign activities, but as town halls where he could communicate directly with the American people without filters or interpretation from hostile media. The media coverage remained intense and often adversarial throughout his term, but he had learned long ago how to use controversy and conflict to maintain attention and communicate his message. The same instincts that had made him a master of publicity in business and entertainment now helped him navigate the most scrutinized position in the world. The family that had supported his business career continued to play important roles in his political success. His children brought their own expertise and perspective to various aspects of the administration while maintaining the family bonds that had always been central to his identity and motivation. The 2020 election presented new challenges as he sought to maintain power in a changed political environment. The campaign was unlike anything in American history, conducted largely during a global pandemic that had transformed society and created economic disruptions that tested every assumption about governance and leadership. The results of that election led to unprecedented controversy and legal challenges that reflected the deep divisions within American society about the nature of democracy, the integrity of electoral systems, and the peaceful transfer of power that had been taken for granted for more than 2 centuries. The events of January 6th, 2021, at the Capitol represented a culmination of tensions that had been building throughout his presidency and beyond. The crowds that gathered that day included many of the same people who had attended his rallies for years, now expressing their frustration with what they believed was a stolen election and a corrupted system. The second impeachment that followed was another unprecedented moment in American history, reflecting the extent to which his presidency had challenged traditional norms and institutions while also revealing the deep partisan divisions that characterized modern American politics. The transition from the presidency back to private life represented another remarkable transformation in a career marked by constant evolution and reinvention. The man who had once descended the Trump Tower escalator to announce his candidacy now faced the challenge of defining his post presidential role and influence. The legal challenges that emerged after leaving office tested his resilience and determination in ways that even the financial crises of the 1990s had not. Multiple investigations, civil lawsuits, and criminal charges created pressures that would have overwhelmed most individuals, but he approached them with the same combative spirit that had characterized his entire career. The continued rallies and political activities demonstrated that his influence extended far beyond any single office or position. The movement he had created during the 2016 campaign had taken on a life of its own, with millions of Americans continuing to look to him for leadership and direction regardless of his official status. The 2024 campaign announcement represented yet another chapter in a story that had already defied every conventional expectation. At an age when most people were contemplating retirement, he was seeking to become only the second person in American history to serve non-consecutive terms as president. The legal proceedings that continued throughout the campaign created unprecedented questions about the intersection of criminal justice and democratic politics. The spectacle of a former president and current candidate facing multiple criminal trials while seeking to return to the White House was without precedent in American history. The primary campaign that followed demonstrated the enduring loyalty of his base, while also revealing the challenges of maintaining political relevance in a rapidly changing media and political environment. The same skills that had made him successful in previous campaigns were tested by new platforms, new competitors, and new issues that hadn't existed during his earlier political career. As this remarkable journey continues to unfold, the boy from Queens, who became the man from Manhattan, who conquered television and transformed politics, remains a figure whose influence on American society extends far beyond any single achievement or controversy. The foundation that was laid in that Tudor mansion in the 1940s, strengthened through decades of business success and celebrity, tested by financial crisis and personal challenges, has proven strong enough to support ambitions that seemed impossible when they were first conceived. The story continues, as it always has, with the same determination, resilience, and willingness to challenge conventional wisdom that have characterized every chapter of this extraordinary American journey. From real estate developer to television star to president and beyond, Donald Trump has consistently demonstrated that in America, with enough vision, persistence, and courage, any dream is possible and any destination is within reach. And so tonight, as we reach the end of this remarkable story, we're reminded that some journeys never truly end. They simply evolve, adapt, and continue forward, carrying with them all the lessons learned, relationships built, and dreams achieved along the way. The boy who once played with blocks in Queens grew up to reshape skylines, redefine entertainment, and transform politics, proving that the American dream remains as powerful and accessible today as it was when this story began more than 7 decades ago. Sweet dreams.